In the heart of Makoni district, just outside the quiet town of Rusape, lived a girl named Nhamo. At only 15, she had already seen life's harshest face. Her name, Nhamo, which means suffering in Shona, had become a cruel prophecy. When she was 10, her baba passed away. HIV took him slowly, and back then, antiretroviral drugs were only a dream for most villagers. His death left a gap in the homestead, a silence that even the cockerels stopped crowing into. Her Mai Maria, once vibrant and full of song, began to fade. She too was sick, and Nhamo, though just a child, became her caregiver. By the time she turned 14, Maria had also succumbed to the same illness. With both parents gone, the Musha felt empty, haunted by memories of laughter, warm sadza dinners, and evening stories told by the fire. Nhamo stayed alone at the homestead, surviving by doing mabasa emaoko, piece jobs, working on neighbors' fields, fetching water, or herding goats. She had stopped going to school in grade 7, the fees too high, her responsibilities too heavy. She'd long packed away her uniform, now too small, but still neatly folded in a tin trunk under her reed mat. Then came Baba Mukuru Simba, her father's older brother, tall and loud, with eyes that looked past her as if she were invisible. He arrived one afternoon, goats in tow, declaring that the land and the huts were rightfully his. This land belonged to my younger brother. Now that he's late, I am the oldest and will inherit it, and there is nothing you can do about it, he said to the gathered villagers. No one stood up for Nhamo. Who would dare challenge Simba? He moved in with his wife, Mai Tendi, and their children. Nhamo was banished to the Dura, the small round hut used to store maize. At night, rats scurried above her head, and during the day she worked like a maid, fetching firewood, pounding maize, and tending fields that would never feed her. Mai Tendi was no kinder than her husband. When meals were served, Nhamo was left with the dregs, if anything at all. Often, she went to bed with an empty stomach, except for the boiled maize, Nemo, or sweet potatoes shared by old Gogomoyo from 2 homesteads away. Shinga mwanangu, Gogomoyo would whisper, pressing a worn coin into Namo's palm. The ancestors are watching. But life had yet more trials in store. One hot afternoon, while chickens pecked at the dry earth and the air buzzed with cicadas, Simba called Nhamo. "I've found a man who wants to marry you," he said bluntly, eyes narrowed. "His name is Moses, a Kabva Harare, and he has a job as a gardener." Moses was 26, with quick fists and a quicker temper. The villagers knew him. He drank too much and was often heard shouting at his ambuya, especially after a visit to the local beer hall. No father wanted to give their daughter to him. But for Simba, Moses was an answer. "Akayenda," he muttered. "She will no longer be my problem." Nhamo stood silently, her small frame shaking, dust clinging to her bare feet. She was only a child, but in her eyes flickered something that no one saw. Hope, buried deep, waiting for its chance. Aish, the whole marriage thing happened just like that. Uncle Simba didn't waste time. As soon as Moses dropped off the little Rora items, he was like, "It's done. You're now a wife." No one even asked Nhamo how she felt about it. Ha, van huva kangonya rara. People watched, but deep down, they all knew the girl was being thrown into fire. The vibe around the village wasn't right. You could see it on people's faces. "Shame that girl. She's still a baby. Manji this Moses guy," one woman mumbled. Moses was known, and not for good things. That one had a temper like no man's business. When he was drunk, even his ambuya would lock herself in the kitchen hut. But Nhamo, with her small bundle and broken heart, followed him. She had no choice. She was tired of the hunger, tired of being treated like a stray dog at her uncle's place. Maybe this would be better, she thought. At the beginning, it wasn't too bad. Moses wasn't sweet, but he wasn't hitting her either. He brought her lotion, a few clothes from town, and once gave her money to buy sugar. Ha! She even smiled a bit when he called her my wife in front of his friends. She was doing everything, cooking, washing, working in the fields. Even when she was tired, she kept going. She told herself, let me just hold on. Maybe this is what life is for people like me. But when December came and Moses came back from Harare for his leave, things changed. The guy came back with a whole new attitude, drinking every day, shouting over small things, and acting like a boss. You'd think he was dealing with a grown woman, not a girl who still remembered grade 7 songs. Nhamo, where's my food? Why are you looking at me like that? Who did you talk to at the borehole? The insults came like rain. Then the beatings followed. Sometimes it was just a slap. Other days he used a belt. And at night, that's when he became a different person. He'd come in drunk, smelling like cachasu, and do things no husband should do. He'd grab her, tear her dress, and force himself on her like she was nothing. You're my wife, you hear me? This is what marriage is. Uri wangu. Nhamo stopped talking, stopped laughing. She became like a shadow of herself. Every day she woke up, swept the yard, cleaned the dishes, and forced herself to be okay. But the neighbors saw. Her eyes were always swollen. Her steps were slow. The sparkle in her eyes was gone. But in the village, people liked to mind their own. She's married now, they'd say. That's just how marriage is. Only Gogomoyo still showed love. One day, she called Nhamo over, gave her some sweet potatoes, and sat her down. My daughter, she said, looking at her with soft eyes, your mother was a strong woman. She didn't go through all that suffering for you to end up like this. She gave her a small wooden pendant. Keep this close. One day, you'll need courage. And when that day comes, don't be afraid to run. That night, Nhamo lay on her mat, the pendant clutched in her hand, her body bruised, but her spirit beginning to wake up. This can't be my whole life, she thought. Something has to change. By the time she turned 16, Namo's life had already taken turns most girls her age couldn't even imagine. Moses had gone back to Harare to continue with his gardening job, leaving her behind, 8 months pregnant, alone in a small crumbling hut with no one to talk to, no family, and no support. She had never been to the clinic, not even once. No antenatal visits, no health talks, no nurse ever sat down to explain what to expect. She didn't even know when the baby would come or what signs to look out for. To be honest, she didn't even understand how labor worked. All she knew was what she'd overheard from women at the borehole or during village gossip. Labor is like your body is tearing apart, they used to say, laughing with each other, not realizing how real those words would become for her. The day it happened, the sky was heavy with clouds. It had been hot all day, and Nhamo had just finished washing Heronly blanket when she felt a strange tightening in her belly. At first, she thought it was just hunger or tiredness, but as the night came, the pain got worse. It started slowly, cramps, sharp and low. Then it hit like thunder. The pain wrapped around her whole body, squeezing her from inside. She screamed, she cried, she rolled on the dusty mat on the floor, sweat pouring down her face. She shouted into the darkness, "Help me, please, somebody!" But no one came. Most of the villagers had already gone to sleep. Moses's house was far from the others, and people were used to ignoring cries from that direction. They thought it was just another fight, just another night in that cursed homestead. Nhamo didn't know where the baby would come from. She had no clue what to do. Her legs were shaking, her dress soaked in sweat, and fear gripped her like a cold hand. All she could think was, am I going to die like this, alone? Hours passed. The pain was unbearable. She clawed at the ground, bit down on her chitenge cloth, begging for it to stop. Then, by the grace of God, a neighbor, Mai Tari, who had gone outside to relieve herself, heard the faint scream scudding through the night. Wait, is that a child crying? She asked herself, quickly tying her headscarf and running toward the noise. When she reached the hut and pushed the door open, what she saw made her freeze. Nhamo was on the floor, legs trembling, eyes wide, half conscious, barely able to speak. Blood was already on the floor, and the baby was coming. Aish! Mwari wangu! Maitari shouted. Hold on, my child! With hands that had helped bring many babies into the world and prayers whispered between breaths, she coached Nhamo through the delivery. It was rough, raw, and painful, but by the time the first bird cried into the dawn, Nhamo had given birth to a baby boy, tiny, crying, full of life. Nhamo, drenched in sweat and tears, looked down at the baby in her arms. Her hands were shaking, her body broken, but her heart was beating with something new, something she'd never felt before. She had survived. Welcome to the world, little one, she whispered, her voice barely there. Maitari wiped the baby clean, wrapped him in the old cloth she had brought, and sat next to the young girl. You did well, my daughter, she said softly. You are stronger than you know. And just like that, a new chapter had begun. Not easier, not perfect, but it had begun. Weeks went by. The baby, Tadiwa, was growing slowly. A soft, quiet boy with big, searching eyes, always clinging to his mother's Chester back. Nhamo, still just a child herself, had no clue how to be a mother, but she was doing her best. Bathing him in a small dish basin, feeding him with sadzaremhunga mixed with a little cooking oil when breast milk wasn't enough, singing lullabies her own mother used to hum when life was still good. But it wasn't easy. Some nights, Tadiwa cried non-stop. Nhamo would walk around the small hut with him on her shoulder, tears rolling down her own cheeks too. There were no nappies, no clinic visits, no one to teach her how to deal with fevers or rashes, just survival, day by day. The only reason she managed at all was because of the village women, especially Mai Tari and one or two others who would bring salt, porridge, sometimes even a bit of cooking oil from their own cupboards. Moses is not serious, they would say, shaking their heads. How can a man leave his wife and baby like this? Everyone in the village had heard that Moses knew about the birth. Someone from the Makombi rank had told him in Harare. But still, no call, no visit, not even a message sent through a friend. After almost 2 months of struggling, Nhamo had enough. I can't live like this, she said one afternoon, strapping Tadiwa on her back. I didn't marry myself. If he's hiding in Harare, I'm going to find him. She borrowed bus fare from Gogomoyo, just enough to get to Mbare. No plan, no address. Just the name of the neighborhood Moses had once mentioned, and the hope that someone, somewhere, would point her in the right direction. That journey was long, hot, loud, packed in the back of a combi with strangers who kept glancing at the young girl and the baby on her back, wondering what story they carried. When she finally arrived in Harare, the city was a beast of noise, smoke, and unfamiliar streets. But Nhamo kept asking, kept walking, refusing to give up. And then she found him, late afternoon. Moses was at his cousin's flat in Glen Norah, sitting outside with his friends, drinking chibuku and laughing, acting like life was sweet, until he looked up and saw her, Nhamo, standing there in a faded dress, dusty sandals, baby tied on her back, eyes full of fire and fatigue. For a moment, Moses froze. The cup in his hand hung mid-air. His friends went silent. The shame, the shock, the fear, it all flashed across his face. Ha, Nhamo, what are you doing here? he stammered. But Nhamo didn't smile, didn't cry. She just looked him dead in the eye and said, I came to show you your son, and to remind you I'm not a ghost you can forget in the village. For a moment, everyone was quiet, the kind of silence that makes even the wind stop moving. There stood Nhamo, young, thin, dust on her feet, the baby on her back shifting gently as he slept. She looked nothing like the girl Moses had left behind, and everything like the woman life had forced her to become. But instead of standing up and coming closer, instead of reaching for his son or saying something kind, Moses's face turned dark. He stood up slowly, brushing his shirt as if her presence had brought dirt into his life. What kind of embarrassment is this? He barked, his voice rising. You just show up here like a mad person, in front of my friends? Do I live with you here? Nhamo was stunned. She didn't expect hugs, no. But this? She didn't expect this. Moses, she said quietly, trying to stay calm. I just wanted you to see your son. You haven't come back. You haven't sent anything. We've been suffering. Moses stepped forward, his eyes cold. So now you're coming to Harare to show off your suffering. Who told you to come here? Who even said that baby is mine? Before she could respond, the first slap came, hot, fast, unexpected. Then another. Nhamo staggered, shielding the baby, her hands trembling. Get out of here, he shouted. I don't want to see you here again. You can go back to Rusape. Go cry to your villagers. None of his friends said a word. They just watched. Some even turned away. Moses grabbed the small bag she had brought and threw it down the stairs. Take your nonsense and go, he shouted. Tears burning in her eyes, Nhamo bent down, picked up her bag with one hand, the other holding tightly onto her child. Her heart was crushed, but she refused to scream, refused to beg. She turned around and walked away, slow steps, heavy steps. Just like that, Harare had chewed her up and spat her out. That night, she slept on a bench at the bus rank, Tadiwa still tied to her back. People passed her like she was invisible, but she sat there, her eyes wide open, staring at nothing. In that moment, she knew, Moses will never be my rescue, and I have to stop waiting for him to be. A month passed. Nhamo was back in Rusape, trying to piece herself back together. Life was quiet, heavy. Every day was the same. Wake up early, fetch water, cook, take care of baby Tadiwa. She didn't speak much. She no longer expected anything from Moses. After what he had done in Harare, she had finally accepted that she was on her own. Then, one Sunday afternoon, just as the sun was sinking behind the gum trees, she heard footsteps outside the yard. She looked up, and there he was, Moses, smiling, holding 2 plastic bags full of groceries, rice, cooking oil, a pack of diapers, a few tomatoes, and a loaf of bread. Ah, my wife, he said like nothing had ever happened. I've come home. Look, I even brought you guys some food. Nhamo just stared at him. Her heart sank. This was the same man who had beaten her, thrown her out, denied his own son. And now he was here, acting like he had simply gone to fetch matches from the shops. She didn't say a word. She stepped aside and let him in. He played the role perfectly, sat with Tadiwa, even though the baby didn't recognize him, told jokes, ate the food she cooked, slept on the same mat, like he was making up for lost time. To outsiders, it looked like the happy family had reunited. He even walked with her to the borehole once, and people began to whisper again. Maybe Moses has changed. Ah, she's lucky he came back. At least the baby has a father now. But only Nhamo knew the truth. Each time he smiled, she felt sick. Each time he touched her, she felt cold inside. She laughed when he made jokes, because that's what good wives are expected to do. She cleaned his clothes and warmed his food, not because she loved him, but because she was too exhausted to fight anymore. At night, she lay still next to him, staring at the roof of the hut. She had buried her anger, hidden her pain, but deep inside, a quiet voice was growing louder. This can't be the life I live forever. Something has to give. The rains had just started that year, heavy, wild, rattling the grass roofs at night like fists. Nhamo was 17 now, still just a girl, but already feeling like a woman twice her age, bones heavy from carrying a life she hadn't chosen. Tadiwa was almost walking, a small, wobbly thing with wide eyes and a quiet laugh. Most days, he was the only reason she smiled anymore. Moses had come back again, this time with new promises. He said he was serious now, that he was building a life for them. He said she needed to give him another child. A real family has more than one, he said one night, drunk on cheap cachasu, his breath sour in the small hut. The door slammed open so hard the whole hut shook. Nhamo barely had time to gather the children into her arms before Moses stumbled in, reeking of cachasu and sweat, his shirt half torn, his face twisted in a drunken rage. "Where's my food?" he barked, kicking over the empty cooking pot by the fire. His voice was louder than the thunder outside. Tadiwa whimpered from where he clung to Namo's skirt. Baby Anesu, barely a few months old, let out a small, frightened cry. "There's no mealie meal left," Nhamo said quietly, her throat dry, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. "Itrid, I tried to borrow from my Tari." Before she could finish, Moses crossed the room in 3 steps. The back of his hand cracked across her cheek so hard she saw stars. She stumbled backward, shielding Anesu with her body, but he was on her again, fists, boots, curses flying like stones. "You embarrass me," he roared. "You think I'm a fool, letting my wife go begging like a stray dog." Another kick to her ribs. She gasped, the world tilting sideways. Blood filled her mouth, warm and metallic. Somewhere in the distance, she heard Tadiwa screaming. Somewhere in the distance, a neighbor's dog barked once and fell silent. But no one came. No one ever came. Moses grabbed her by the hair and yanked her up, spit flying from his mouth. "You think you can live without me? You're nothing without me." The room spun. The babies cried. Namo's body hung limp, but inside her chest, a small flame flickered to life. Weak, desperate, but alive. "I am more than this," she thought. "I have to be." When he finally staggered out into the night, slamming the door behind him, Nhamo lay on the dirt floor for a long time, tasting blood, feeling her broken ribs with every breath. And that's when she knew. If I stay, one day they will find only my body here. My children will be orphans, and no one will remember I ever lived. The decision came to her not like a shout, but like a whisper. Run. The morning after the beating, Nhamo could barely walk. Every step sent knives of pain through her side. Her face was swollen, her lips split, but she strapped Anesu to her back, gripped Tadiwa's tiny hand, and made her way through the dusty paths between homesteads, keeping her head low. She wasn't going to the borehole. She wasn't going to the fields. She was going to Ambuya Moyo. Ambuya lived 2 homesteads away, a thin old woman with gray hair always tied under a faded doke, a woman who had seen too much but still had kindness left in her hands. When Ambuya opened her door and saw Nhamo, bruised, barefoot, clutching 2 crying children, she didn't ask questions. She pulled her inside, set a chipped mug of mahu in front of her, and waited. For a while, Nhamo just sat there, staring into nothing. Finally, in a voice as soft as dust, she said, "Ambuya, I think I will die if I stay." Ambuya's eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed steady. "You are right, Mwanangu, and you must not die there." She reached under her mat and pulled out a small, crumpled leaflet, something someone had given her at the last market day in town. The paper was thin, almost tearing at the folds, but the words were clear. Kudzoka Women's Trust, supporting girls, saving lives, shelter, counseling, skills training. They are here, Nhamo, Ambuya said, pressing the leaflet into her trembling hands. They are real, and they are looking for girls like you, girls who were never given a real chance. Namo's hands shook as she held the paper. But how will I get there? She whispered. I have no money, nowhere to go. Ambuya smiled a sad, proud smile. Don't worry about that. I will talk to Mukoma Jonah. He's taking his vegetables to Rusape tomorrow. He can give you a lift, early, before the sun rises. Bring only what you can carry, Mwanangu. Bring your children. Bring your heart. Leave everything else behind. Nhamo nodded, tears blurring the words on the leaflet. She didn't cry from fear. She cried from the strange, painful feeling of realizing there was still a small doorway open for her. After all the years of locked ones, the night felt endless. Nhamo lay awake on the reed mat, staring at the cracked roof, listening to every creak of the wind outside, every distant bark of dogs. Moses hadn't come home. Maybe he was still drinking at Chiga's shebeen. Maybe he had passed out somewhere. Either way, she knew. Tonight was the only chance. Beside her, Tadiwa snored softly, one small hand thrown across her waist. Anesu, wrapped tight against her chest, nuzzled for milk in her sleep. Nhamo closed her eyes, prayed a simple prayer, not for strength, not for blessings, just for a clean path. Before the roosters could crow, before the first charcoal smoke rose from kitchen huts, she slipped out of bed. She moved quickly but quietly, tucked the baby against her back, wrapped a tattered cloth around the few things she could carry, an old jersey for the children, a small plastic bottle half full of cooking oil, a handful of roasted Nhamo seeds from Ambuya Moyo. She didn't take anything Moses could claim later, no pots, no blankets, no chickens. She left behind everything that had weighed her down. Only her children mattered now. Outside the darkness was thick and wet with mist. Her heart thudded so loudly she was sure the whole village could hear it. But no one stirred. Not the goats, not the neighbors, not even the trees. She walked fast along the narrow path, clutching Tadiwa's hand, whispering to him when he stumbled, Quiet, Mwana, we are going somewhere better. At the crossroads by the old baobab tree, she saw it. Mukoma Jonah's cart, already loaded with sacks of cabbages for the market. He was there, waiting, just like Ambuya Moyo had promised. Without a word, he helped her climb up, tucked a torn blanket around her and the children to shield them from the cold. No one asked questions. The cart rumbled onto the dirt road, leaving behind the small cluster of huts, the empty fields, the memories that still smelled of blood and broken promises. As the first weak light of dawn stretched across the hills, Nhamo looked back once, just once, at the only home she had ever known. It didn't even look like home anymore. It looked like a grave she had climbed out of. She tightened her grip on Tadiwa, felt Anesu breathing against her back, and faced forward. Whatever waited for her in Rusape, the fear, the unknown, the hard work. It was better than dying quietly where no one would even remember her name. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know if she would make it. But for the first time in years, she felt something crack open inside her chest. Not hope, not yet, just the first breath of it, and that was enough. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my story. I sincerely hope you found it engaging and meaningful. If you did, I would greatly appreciate it if you could like, share, and subscribe to stay connected and support future content.